Hello there. You're safe now. Take a breath. The day is over, and nothing more is expected of you. This is your time. A moment to let go, to rest, and drift into another world. So close your eyes if you'd like. Let me tell you a story. A slow, quiet story of salt air, worn wood, and tides that never stopped rising. It all began far from here, in a place called Marelu. Marelu was a port at the edge of the known world. Not grand, not loud, just slow. Each morning, it rose from the fog like a dream trying to remember itself. Boats sat still, unmoving on the glassy surface of the water, while seagulls circled above in silence. The wooden docks creaked gently as old boots stepped across them, one after the other, men carrying nets, buckets, and baskets still damp from the morning sea. There were no sounds of shouting, no rush, no bells, just the soft lapping of waves, the rustle of sails not yet raised, and the hum of a town too tired to hurry. At the far end of the main quay sat a small tavern with a broken sign, the Crooked Bridge. Its windows were fogged, its door slightly ajar, and from inside came the faint scent of ashes, old rum, and warm bread. It was inside this tavern, in the quietest corner, that Elian Merlot waited. He wasn't a loud man. You wouldn't notice him in a crowd, but if you did, if your eyes met his, you might pause. Just a moment. There was something about the way he held still, like he knew how to wait longer than anyone else. They said he'd been a sailor since before he could write his name, that he'd seen both sides of a war and both sides of the law. But in Marelu no one asked too many questions. That was one of its better qualities. This morning Elian wasn't here for a drink. He was waiting for a sign, not a letter or a message, but something far smaller, a glance, a gesture, a shift in the air. He was waiting for the Lamento del Sur. It wasn't the kind of ship you'd find listed in a port registry. Its sails were patched, its flag absent. Its name, if spoken aloud, was often followed by silence. No one ever saw her arrive. She simply appeared. Anchored far from the others, the Lamento looked more like a shadow than a ship. Her hull was dark with age, her ropes stiff with salt. But to those who knew, truly knew, she was more than she seemed. A vessel for ghosts, some said. A ship of second chances, said others. Elian stood now, finished his quiet drink, and placed a single coin on the table. The tavern keeper didn't speak, didn't need to. The walk to the far dock was short. The mist was low and thick now, wrapping around the town like a blanket, swallowing sound and shape. There, near the last post, stood a man in a dark coat with no hat. He said nothing, only nodded toward the sea. Elian followed his gaze, and there she was, still, waiting, the Lamento del Sur. He climbed aboard without ceremony. The deck was damp but clean. The sails were half raised, just enough to sway gently with the wind that wasn't there. No one welcomed him. No one needed to. He had been expected. A silent figure guided him below deck, through narrow halls and wooden stairs. The air smelled of oil, parchment, and seaweed, until they reached a room tucked in the aft, where a single lantern burned low over a map-covered table. Behind it sat Captain Mireia. She didn't stand, she only looked up, eyes dark, steady as tidewater. Elian Merlot? I am. You speak when spoken to? I speak when needed. Good. She slid a small brass key across the table. Third hammock to port. You'll listen before you act. You'll keep what you see to yourself. And when the time comes, you'll know why you're here. He took the key, not with hesitation, but with the quiet calm of a man who had nowhere else to go, because sometimes to leave behind what breaks you, you have to go where no one remembers your name, And out here, beyond the edge of maps, there are no names, only wind and salt, and stories whispered in the dark. The ship creaked softly beneath his feet, not from waves, the sea was still, but from age, from memory. Wood like this had carried many men before him, some dreamers, some drifters, and some who never came back. Elian followed the silent crewmen below deck. The air changed as they descended, cooler, older, filled with a mix of salt, oil, and something deeper, not unpleasant, just lived in. They passed rows of hammocks, some swinging gently with the movement of the ship, others already occupied. Faces turned away. No one spoke. Third on the left, the crewman whispered, and then vanished into the shadows like smoke. Elian placed his small bag beside the hammock. He sat, listened, waited. Above him, the wooden beams moaned quietly, not in protest, but as if the ship itself was thinking, remembering. He lay back, staring at the curve of the ceiling. Somewhere, far up, the deck breathed under the night sky. Down here, everything was dim. The lanterns barely flickered. The quiet was total. He did not sleep, not at first. Sleep does not come quickly to those who have lived too long on the edge of decisions. His hands rested on his chest, calloused and worn. He traced the lines of old scars. Some earned in storms, others in silence. Around him the other men breathed steadily. Who were they really? Not many pirates looked like pirates. That was something outsiders never understood. They looked like fishermen, like sailors, like merchants. But they moved differently, as if always measuring the space between them and the nearest escape. At some point, Elian must have drifted off, because when he woke it was darker still, and a figure stood at the end of his hammock, not threatening, just there, watching. Elian did not speak. The figure leaned closer. It was a boy, maybe 16, barely a shadow, eyes sharp, voice quiet. "You're the one they waited for, huh?" Elian didn't answer. The boy nodded to himself. "Don't worry, nobody talks much here. You'll fit in." Then he turned and disappeared among the hammocks. Elian sat up slowly. Somewhere above a bell rang once. A signal, soft and low, the kind meant only for those who already knew what it meant. By morning the ship had already moved, not far, just away from the harbor, away from sight. The land was now a gray line behind them, fading, forgettable. The sea was calm, not still, always moving, always breathing, but calm. The sails swelled gently, the ropes creaked, like old bones stretching, and the sky above was the color of soft linen brushed with threads of cloud. Elian climbed the steps to the upper deck. He paused for a moment at the top. The light touched his face. Salt wind pressed against him like a familiar hand. There were fewer crew on deck than expected. A tall man with copper skin and one ear missing was polishing a compass near the helm. A woman with wide shoulders coiled a rope, her hands fast and practiced. And near the bow, standing alone, was Captain Mireia. She looked smaller now, with her coat loose and hair tied low, but her presence hadn't changed, still silent, still steady. Elian walked toward her. She didn't turn, just spoke, as if she had known his footsteps all along. "Do you remember your first storm, Merlot?" He paused, unsure how to answer. "Yes," he said finally. "What did it sound like?" He took a breath, like something that had been sleeping for centuries, angry to be woken, alive. Mireia turned now, her face unreadable. "Good," she said. "You know what we're sailing toward then?" He didn't ask what she meant. He knew better. The sea had many faces. Calm was just one of them. As the morning stretched on, Elian was given small tasks, checking lines, watching cloud movements. Not much, but enough to learn. The Lamento del Sur was different. Not in how she moved. She was steady, slow, quiet, but in how she was handled. There were no loud orders, no unnecessary talk. Each sailor moved like part of a single body, each motion deliberate, as if rehearsed long ago. Elian respected that. He moved the same way. He didn't ask about their heading. He knew again that he wouldn't be told. You don't ask where shadows go. You follow them and wait to learn. The second night aboard the Lamento del Sur came quietly. No announcement, no bells, just a shift in light, and the feeling that the day had grown tired. Below deck, the lanterns burned lower than before. The wood around Elian seemed to breathe, warm and worn, like it remembered every footstep it had ever carried. He lay back in the same hammock, same third spot on the left. This time, though, he wasn't trying to sleep. He was listening. It began as a whisper, too soft to understand, but steady, a rhythm under the rhythm. A voice? No, not quite. More like a memory trying to become a word. He sat up. The other hammock swayed gently. Most were still occupied. No one else moved. No one else seemed to hear it. But the sound continued. A soft murmuring from beneath the floorboards. Not wind, not rats. Something older. Elian stood barefoot. The wood was cool under his feet. He walked slowly toward the stern. Past crates, barrels, nets. Past a man asleep with a small charm clutched in his hand. Down to where the planks changed color. Darker, warped with time. The sound grew stronger, like someone telling a story through a wall. Not in fear, not in anger, but in patience. He placed a hand on the wood, and for just a moment, he heard words. We never meant to stay, but the sea. It keeps what it wants. Elian pulled his hand back. Silence. The voices were gone. The cold crept into his fingertips. He returned to his hammock without a word. Didn't mention it in the morning. Didn't ask the boy, or the captain, or the man with the charm. Some things are only real when you don't speak them aloud. Above deck, the sky had shifted again. It wasn't stormy, not yet, but the light had lost its warmth. The horizon was pale and empty, like the world had forgotten how to end. Captain Mireia stood near the helm, as always, still, watching. Elian approached. You slept, she said. He nodded. Did the ship speak to you? He didn't answer. She didn't press. Instead, she pointed to the far edge of the sea. There, that line, do you see it? He looked. A faint shimmer, like heat over sand. But this was water. Cold. Open. Yes, that's the fade. He turned to her. The fade? She didn't blink. It's where ships go to disappear. He waited. She continued. Not sink, not crash. Disappear. Quietly. Some say it's fog, others a current. Some say it's time itself. Bending. Elian stared out again. The shimmer remained. Still distant, but closer than before. And we're sailing toward it? He asked. We always were, Mireia said. Every ship is, eventually. By midday the crew had changed, not in form, in movement. They were quieter, slower, like people who had seen something but chosen not to speak of it. Ropes were tied more carefully, knots double-checked, eyes rarely lifted from their tasks. The boy, the one who had spoken to Elian on the first night, sat near the stairs with a piece of paper. He was drawing. Lines, swirls, dots. What is it? Elian asked. The boy didn't look up. It's the fade, he said. I saw it once before. You've been there. The boy paused. I've lost someone there. That's almost the same. Elian didn't press further. Instead, he looked at the drawing. It didn't look like waves or fog or light. It looked like a door, half open, As night fell again, no orders were given, no sails adjusted. The ship simply continued. The stars above were sharp but far apart, like they were drifting away one by one, and Elian, standing at the bow, felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not fear, not excitement, stillness, as if something ancient was waiting, and had always been. The fourth night began without a sunset. There was no orange, no crimson, no gold, only the sky dimming as if a hand were slowly pulling a curtain across it. The stars appeared one by one, but weaker than before, pale, drifting, distant. The Lamento del Sur moved forward steady as breath, not fast, not slow, just forward. Elian stood near the railing, his fingers resting on the cool wood. He watched the sea, the same sea that had raised him, broken him, hidden him, and there on the horizon it waited. The fade. It was clearer now, a wall of air and mist, thin but vast, not fog, but something like it. It shimmered not from light, but from memory, as if the sea was trying to forget what lay behind it. He closed his eyes, listened. The ship made no noise but a creak, no sail flapped, no order called, only the sound of breath and water and time slipping. Below deck, the boy was awake again. He sat cross-legged on a barrel drawing, the same door as before, but now it was open just a bit wider. "You saw it again," Elian said. The boy nodded. "It gets closer when you sleep. That's what they say." "Who's they?" He didn't answer. Instead he looked up, eyes wide but tired. "Do you think the sea forgets us when we go in?" he asked. "Or does it remember and keep remembering forever?" Elian didn't know, but part of him hoped it did remember, because sometimes being remembered, even by something as vast and uncaring as the ocean, was better than being forgotten entirely. Later at the helm, Captain Mireia held a journal, not leather-bound, just rough cloth and fraying corners. She flipped it open, reading lines Elian couldn't see. He waited beside her, not close but not far. She spoke without looking up. "Tomorrow we enter the fade. We pass through." He let the words settle. "And then..." She closed the book. Her fingers rested on the worn cover. "Then we find out what the sea wants from us." Elian turned to her, his voice low. "You don't know." She looked at him, not with surprise, but with the calm of someone who'd asked herself the same question many times. "I know what I hope," she said, "but the sea doesn't care what I hope." That night, no one slept. Not fully. The crew moved silently, tightening ropes, checking knots, storing objects that might fall. Not out of fear, but out of respect. Respect for what? Not a storm, not a battle, but a silence that waited just ahead. The boy handed Elian a small folded paper before retreating to his hammock. "It's a map," he said, "but it only works if you don't look at it." Elian unfolded it. Blank. He smiled, then placed it inside his coat, beside the scar on his chest that still ached in the rain. By the time morning should have arrived, the fade was all around them. It didn't rush in. It didn't fall like a curtain. It simply became. Light faded without darkening. Sound thinned, and color lost its edge. The Lamento del Sur passed into the fade like a memory into sleep. No alarm, no farewell, only breath and mist, and the creak of a ship that remembered more than it ever said. The fade was not a place. It was an absence of time, of distance, of noise. Once inside, the Lamento del Sur no longer seemed to cut through the sea. It floated, suspended in something thicker than air, lighter than water. The wind had vanished. No pull on the sails, no push against the skin. Even the usual creaks of the old ship were gone, as if the wood itself had gone still, listening perhaps, or simply surrendering. Elian stood alone near the bow. His breath felt too loud, too real. He reached for the rail, not for balance, but for anchor, something solid. All around them, the fade pressed gently, like a dream that did not want to end. The crew moved slowly now. Every gesture was careful, as if they feared disturbing something unseen. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The rules had changed. Even Captain Miria no longer stood at the helm. She had retreated below, leaving only the copper-skinned helmsman behind. He held the wheel with both hands, eyes closed, not steering, just holding, as though it might drift away if left alone. Below deck, the boy sat in silence, his drawing rolled up beside him. He looked older somehow, not in body, in stillness. Elian sat across from him. The lanterns barely burned, no flame, just a low glow, like memory trying to be light. "Have you heard it?" the boy whispered. Elian shook his head. "Not yet." The boy nodded once. "You will. Everyone does." Time passed strangely inside the fade. There was no sun to track, no tides to follow, only soft gray light, endless, unchanging. Some men paced slowly along the deck, counting steps. Others stared at the water, though there were no waves to watch. Elian for the first time felt something new, a quiet beneath the quiet, a silence that hummed. At first he thought it was inside his head, but then he realized it was inside the ship, not from voices, from the ship itself. It was humming, softly, a deep low tone like breath beneath wood, alive, not mechanical, not magical, just present. In the captain's quarters, Elian found Mireia seated at her table. Maps were spread before her, but blank. She wasn't reading them. She was touching them, fingertips grazing lines that were no longer visible. She looked up as he entered. "The fade doesn't let you see forward," she said. "I noticed." She traced an invisible path on the paper, but it lets you feel backward, every choice, every wake left behind. Elian stepped closer. "Are we lost?" "No," she said. "We're being tested." He said nothing. After a moment, she looked up again. When the sea tests you, it doesn't want answers. It wants truth. That night, if it could still be called night, Elian returned to his hammock. He didn't lie down. He sat, waiting. And then he heard it. A single tone, not music, not voice, like a string pulled across the sky, low, pure, endless. It didn't hurt. It didn't comfort. It remembered. And Elian for the first time felt remembered too. Elian did not speak of the sound he heard that night. Not to the boy, not to Mireia, not even to himself. But the sound stayed with him, like salt in the lungs, like a name you almost remember. It wasn't a voice. Not exactly. It had no language, no tone, but it had weight, like a memory spoken by the sea itself. In the early hours, or what passed for them inside the fade, Elian wandered the deck. The others were still below, sleeping or pretending to. Only the helmsman stood above, both hands on the wheel, eyes closed once more. Elian passed him without speaking. They didn't speak now. Words were too sharp, too loud. Silence had become the ship's only true compass. He reached the bow and looked out, but there was no sea, no sky, only endless pale mist, softly pulsing like breath. And then he felt it again, the hum, stronger now, closer. He pressed his palm against the railing, closed his eyes, and the hum became shape, not sound, shape. A presence pressing back against his skin, against his ribs, against his memory. He kept his hand there, feeling the rhythm hidden within it. At first it seemed random, a shifting vibration that rose and fell. But then a pattern emerged, 3 short pulses, a pause, too long, a pause again, like someone knocking from the other side of the wood. He leaned closer, pressing his ear against the rail. The faint scent of salt and tar filled his lungs, and then a voice, or something near enough to one. It came not from the air, but from inside the wood, software hollow, drawn out, as if spoken from far, far away. One word, return. The sound echoed through his chest, not in fear, in recognition. Return? To what? To where? His mouth moved before he could think. I never left, he whispered. The voice did not answer. The hum faded, retreating into the planks, into the ribs of the ship, until there was only silence again. Later, he sat across from the boy in the dim lantern light. The paper in the boy's hands was darker now, not with ink, but as if shadow had soaked into the fibers. It's changing, the boy said. I can see that. The fade is listening, the boy whispered, and it's choosing. Elian leaned forward. Choosing who? The boy didn't reply. Instead, he turned the page toward him. The drawing had shifted. No longer a door, now a ship, their ship, floating above a reflection, but the reflection was wrong. It wasn't the same vessel. The sails were torn, the deck splintered, and at the helm stood a figure, but faceless, hollow. Elian looked up, but the boy was already gone. That night, Elian didn't return to his hammock. Instead, he remained on deck, seated against the mast, watching the mist shift in ways mist should not. Sometimes it curled upward, as if something beneath the ship was breathing. Other times, it parted in slow, deliberate swirls, too precise to be wind. Once, he thought he saw another ship drifting beside them. No lights, no flags, no movement, just shadow, sailing perfectly parallel. He rose to his feet, eyes locked on its silhouette. But when he blinked, it was gone. Or perhaps it was never there at all. The helmsman finally opened his eyes. He looked at Elian without speaking, his gaze deep and unblinking. Then, in a voice low and rough, he said, "You hear it now." Elian hesitated. The hum? The man nodded once. It's older than the ship, older than the sea. Some say it's the ocean dreaming. Others that it's the ocean remembering. Remembering what? The helmsman's mouth curved slightly. Not a smile, something else. What it's lost. The hum returned, deeper this time, and inside it, a feeling. A choice is coming. Not a battle, not a storm. Something quieter, something final. Elian closed his eyes and let the vibrations seep into him. It was not asking him to choose yet, but it was warning him. Some choices once made cannot be unmade. He kept listening until the sound faded into the endless breath of the fade. And for the first time since boarding the Lamento del Sur, he wondered if the ship itself was listening back. The fade did not lift. By now, Elian could no longer remember how long they had been inside it. The light had not changed once. No morning, no evening. Only the same pale glow, as though the world had been reduced to a single breath that refused to end. The crew spoke less each passing hour. When they did, their voices were softer, as if afraid to disturb something listening. Elian began to feel the boundaries of the ship differently. He could sense where the hull ended, where the air began, where the mist touched the sails. It was not sight or sound, it was awareness, the same way you feel the presence of someone standing behind you. One afternoon, if it could be called that, Elian found the boy again. He was on the quarterdeck this time, sitting cross-legged against the rail looking outward. The parchment was on his lap, but he wasn't drawing. He was holding a piece of charcoal loosely, letting it smear faintly against his fingertips. You see it now, the boy said without turning. Elian stepped closer. See what? The other ship. Elian froze. He remembered the shadowed silhouette from nights before, the one that vanished when he blinked. It's there, the boy continued. It's always there, just not where you expect. They stood side by side, gazing into the shifting pale. The mist moved like slow water, curling and folding in itself, and then the outline appeared. It was faint, so faint Elian thought it might be his mind forming shapes in the white. But it was there, the hull, the mast, the gentle sway. It sailed with them, keeping their pace exactly. Is it real? Elian asked. The boy tilted his head. Does it matter? Later, below deck, Elian lay awake in his hammock. The hum had not returned since the night before. He almost missed it. The stillness pressed against his chest. It was heavy now, not gentle. And then a new sound, a whisper, so soft he thought it was the rustle of fabric. But no, it was words, or pieces of them. They slipped through the boards, through the air, through his own breath. He couldn't make them out at first, but slowly they formed. Not all will leave. His eyes opened. The whisper faded. In the galley, a single lantern burned low. Mireia was there, sitting alone at the table. She had a mug of water before her, untouched. You've heard it, she said as he entered. Elian didn't ask how she knew. He only nodded. It tells you what it wants you to hear, she continued. Sometimes truth, sometimes lies. The Fate doesn't care which. Elian sat opposite her. What happens if we don't listen? Her eyes met his. Then it decides for you. That night he returned to the bow. The mist parted slightly ahead, not enough to reveal what lay beyond, but enough to see a shape. It wasn't the other ship. It wasn't land. It wasn't anything he could name. It rose and fell gently, like the back of a living thing just beneath the surface. Too large to be a whale, too slow to be a wave. As it passed beneath them, the Lamento del Sur shivered, not from the sea, from within. The hum returned, rolling through the planks, the ropes, the mast, and into his bones. But this time, it carried more than sound. It carried words. You are not lost. He gripped the railing, the words reverberating in his chest. If they were not lost, then where were they being taken? The answer did not come. Only the mist, only the hum, only the endless patient breath of the fade. The outline of the other ship did not vanish this time. It remained steady in the mist, keeping its silent pace beside them. Elian could see it more clearly now, not its details, but its presence, like a shadow you feel before you see. The Lamento del Sur sailed as if tethered to it. No rope, no chain, just a parallel course, drawn by something neither ship could refuse. In the pale light, Elian noticed movement on the other deck. Figures. They moved slowly, like shapes underwater, their motions blurred. There was no sound from them, no shout across the gap, only a rhythm in their steps, as if they were following a task they had repeated for centuries. He tried to count them, but each time he thought he had the number, it changed. One moment 6, the next 12, sometimes none at all. The boy appeared at his side, silent as ever. They're not crew, the boy said quietly. They're echoes. Elian turned to him. Echoes of what? The boy shrugged, as if the answer was obvious. Of us. Below deck, the air was heavier. The crew avoided one another's eyes, moving through the narrow spaces with unspoken caution. Elian passed by a man polishing a length of rope, though it was already clean. Another sat on a barrel staring at the wall as if it might speak. In the corner near the storage crates, he heard a faint dripping sound, but when he looked there was nothing, No water, no leak, just the slow, measured tap of something unseen. That evening, Maria called him to her quarters. The maps were gone. In their place was a single piece of parchment, blank except for one word, written in black ink so deep it seemed to drink the light. The word was choose. She looked at him with that same unreadable calm. The fate doesn't keep everyone, she said. Some go on, some stay. Elian frowned. Stay where? Her gaze drifted toward the wall, toward the mist beyond it. Here, she said, in its memory. When he left her quarters, the ship felt different, quieter, as if it had stopped breathing. The mist around them thickened, and for a moment he thought he saw the other ship tilt toward them, as if drawn closer. The hum returned, deep, low, but not steady. It wavered as though uncertain. Elian placed his hand against the mast. The vibration traveled through his arm, into his chest, and then a whisper. The decks will match. That night he could not sleep. He paced the length of the deck, counting his steps without realizing it. The boy followed, silent, a shadow within the shadow. When Elian turned, the boy was holding the parchment again. The drawing had changed once more. Now it showed two ships, side by side, their decks aligned perfectly. But there was no sea between them, only mist stretched tight like glass. And on both decks, the same crew. Elian's own face stared back at him from the other ship's rail. A sharp sound broke the stillness, a rope snapping taut. Elian spun toward the bow. The mist between the ships was gone. They were close now, so close he could see the worn wood of the other vessel, the faded lines of carvings long eroded by salt and time, and the figures, not blurred anymore, clear. Each one was someone he knew, the helmsman, Miria, the boy, himself, all standing motionless, watching. The hum deepened, shaking the planks beneath his feet, and then the ships began to drift closer still. The gap between the two ships was now no more than the length of a single step. No wind moved the sails, no wave rocked the hulls. The sea, if it still existed beneath them, had gone still as stone. The Lamento del Sur and its shadow stood side by side, bound by something older than rope, older than wood. Elian gripped the rail and felt the hum thrumming through it. It was not steady now. It pulsed like a heartbeat, quickening. Across from him on the other deck, his own reflection stared back. It was him, yet not him. The same eyes, but heavier. The same posture, but slower. A version that seemed carved from the memory of storms he had not yet faced. The boy stood beside him. He did not look at Elian, but at the other boy across the way. They were identical, down to the faint smudge of charcoal on their fingertips. "What happens now?" Elian asked. "They decide," the boy said. "Who's they?" The boy's eyes met his for the first time in hours. The ships. The hum deepened again. The planks beneath their feet shivered, but not from movement, from attention. The air between the two vessels seemed to tighten, pulling taut like a rope ready to snap. One of the echoes on the other ship moved. It was Mireia, or rather the memory of her. She stepped forward, stopping at the rail. Her lips moved, but no sound crossed the space. Then, without warning, a thin bridge of mist began to stretch from one deck to the other. It solidified slowly, like ice forming over still water. The helmsman appeared at Elian's side. He had left the wheel unattended, but the Lamento del Sur did not drift. "You feel it," the helmsman said quietly. Elian nodded. "It's an invitation," the man continued, "but not one you give back. What happens if I cross?" The helmsman's jaw tightened. You don't cross. You're taken. The mist bridge reached full form. It was narrow, slick, and seemed to shift under its own will. One by one, figures from the other ship began to step onto it, not walking toward them, but pacing slowly, as if testing the air. Elian's reflection was the last to move. It stopped in the center, looking directly at him, and then it smiled. Not a warm smile, not cruel either, just certain. The boy tugged at Elian's sleeve. It's not a test, he whispered. It's a trade. Elian's stomach tightened. A trade for what? The boy's eyes flicked toward the deck as if he could see through the planks into the bones of the ship. For memory. The hum swelled until it was no longer a sound, but a pressure. Elian felt it in his teeth, in the back of his skull. The other Elian took one slow step forward. The planks beneath his feet groaned, but not in strain, in welcome. Mirea's echo stepped aside, leaving a gap on the other deck, a place waiting for him. Then, as if the ships had agreed on something unspoken, the hum stopped. The silence was worse. Every man aboard seemed to be holding his breath. The mist bridge trembled slightly. Elian looked at the boy. The boy gave no sign, no plea, and in that stillness he understood. No one could tell him what would happen next. Not Mireia, not the helmsman, not even the ship. This was his step to take, or refuse. The other Elian raised a hand in silent invitation. The choice hung between them, as heavy as the air itself. The ships waited. The bridge of mist stretched steady between the two ships, thin, fragile but real. It shimmered faintly as if woven from breath and memory. The Lamento del Sur waited. The other ship, its echo, its shadow, waited too. Neither moved, neither swayed. Elian stood at the rail, staring at the figure across from him. His own reflection, the same lines of the face, the same scar across the jaw, the same eyes, but heavier, tired in ways he did not yet feel. The other Elian raised his hand again, an invitation, or a command. It was impossible to know. The boy's voice came quietly at his side. You can't refuse forever. The fade doesn't let you. Elian swallowed. What happens if I go? The boy looked down at the bridge. His fingers tightened around the charcoal still smudged on his hand. You don't come back. Not as you are. Elian's eyes narrowed. And if I don't go? The boy's silence was answer enough. The hum returned. Not gentle now, not patient. It shook through the planks, through the mast, through every rib of the ship. It pressed into Elian's bones, urging him forward. Around him the crew had gathered. No one spoke. No one reached for him. They only watched. Even Mireia, her face unreadable, her hands steady at her sides. Elian gripped the rail tighter. The wood was warm, alive beneath his touch. It felt like a pulse, a heartbeat not his own. He stepped onto the bridge. The mist shifted beneath his weight, not solid but not giving way either. It cradled him, held him, like walking on woven light. The hum grew louder with each step, not in his ears, in his chest, as if the fade itself was pushing him forward. Halfway across, he stopped. The other Elian stood just a few paces ahead, waiting, close enough now to see the faint cracks along his reflection's skin, like porcelain beginning to fracture. The other spoke. The words came without sound, yet Elian heard them clearly. You left me behind. Elian's breath caught. He tried to answer, but his voice was swallowed by the mist. The other Elian stepped closer. You turned your back. On storms, on men, on yourself. Images flickered in the mist around them. A younger Elian holding a rope as waves towered above. Another kneeling beside a man dying on a deck, unable to help. Another walking away from fire and wreckage without looking back. Memories or warnings, it was hard to tell. You left me, the echo repeated. And the sea does not forget. The hum swelled until the bridge shook. The mist churned at their feet. For a heartbeat, Elian thought the whole span might collapse and drag him into the fade itself. He clenched his fists. I didn't leave, he forced out, though the words trembled. I survived. The other's eyes burned with something darker. Survival is forgetting. You cannot carry everything, but you cannot abandon it either. The boy's voice came faintly from the deck behind him. Alien, it's not about going or staying. It's about what you take with you. The echo raised its hand again, and in that moment Elian understood. The choice wasn't whether to cross. It was what part of himself the sea would claim. The mist thickened, swirling into shapes all around him. Faces of men he had sailed with, women he had left behind, storms that had broken his ship, nights he had chosen silence instead of truth. Each one pressed against him, heavy, aching. The other Elian placed a hand on his chest, and Elian felt it, the weight of everything he had forgotten, everything he had buried. It was unbearable, and yet it was him. He closed his eyes, letting the weight press down. For the first time, he did not resist it. He let the sea remember for him. He let the fade hold what he could not. The hum shifted, no longer urgent, no longer harsh. It steadied, became calm again, a lullaby instead of a demand. When he opened his eyes, the other alien was gone. The bridge beneath his feet dissolved into the mist. He was standing once more at the rail of the Lamento del Sur, breathless, shaking, but whole. The crew exhaled as one, as if they too had been holding their breath. The boy lowered his parchment. The image on it had changed again. No longer two ships, just one, sailing forward through a pale sea. No reflection, no echo. Mireia stepped forward. Her eyes met his, calm but searching. You gave it what it wanted, she said softly. Elian's voice was raw. And what was that? Her gaze flicked to the horizon, where the mist began to thin. Your memory, your shadow, the part of you the sea refused to carry. Ahead, the fade glowed faintly, not brighter, clearer, as though an unseen veil was beginning to lift. The Lamento del Sur creaked, stretching its sails once more. The hum faded into silence, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Elian saw a glimmer of true light waiting beyond the mist. The fade was releasing them, but not unchanged. Never unchanged. The mist did not break all at once. It loosened. It thinned at the edges first, as if light were testing its weight from the outside, touching it gently, patiently, and then, only then, asking it to move. Colors returned as memories do, in fragments, a strand of blue, a breath of gold. The pale linen of morning spread quietly over the sky. The Lamento del Sur exhaled as if she had lungs, as if somewhere inside her ribs a long-held breath had finally found its way out. Wind found them next, not a gust, not a shout, just a steady hand placed at their back. The sails shivered, then filled. Ropes lifted and settled with small, familiar complaints. The helmsman, who had not moved for what felt like years, opened his eyes and smiled without teeth. They were leaving the fade, not escaping it, not defeating it, leaving as one leaves a room in which a long conversation has ended, and all the right silences have been shared. Elian stood near the bow with the boy, both of them watching the horizon. The boy's parchment hung at his side, rolled and tied now with a thin strip of cloth. He hadn't drawn since the bridge dissolved. What does it look like? Elian asked. The world, the boy said. Elian nodded. The boy considered this as if it were a serious question, and perhaps it was. Like something that forgives you for not understanding it, he said. He glanced at the parchment, and asks you to try again anyway. Elian didn't answer. He didn't need to. Gulls appeared, first one, then a second, and then a quiet parade of white wings stitching the blue back together. Their calls were ordinary and imperfect, and very much alive. Some of the crew laughed under their breath when they heard them. Others rubbed their eyes as if the sound had dusted sleep from somewhere deep. Captain Mireia came up from below. No ceremony, no announcement, only her presence, steadying the deck more than any ballast could. She leaned on the rail beside them. "Do you remember it?" she asked. Her voice did not specify what it was. The fade, the bridge, the shadow, the choice. It didn't need to. Elian nodded. "I remember what I gave." Mireia watched the line where the water brightened. "The sea keeps what you cannot carry," she said, "and returns what you are willing to hold." "And you?" Elian asked. "What did it take from you?" She smiled a fraction, almost a reflex. "It takes from all of us, but never the same thing twice." The wind freshened. Lines hummed with a comfortingly ordinary song. The ship's old creak returned, not the thinking wood murmur of the fade, but the domestic voice of timber doing its daily work. By noon, if noon it was, their world had turned familiar again. Sky above, water below, horizon straight as a blade. Someone found a lemon in a crate and cut it into thin coins. They passed the pieces around like an offering to the sun. Men made faces at the sour, laughed softly, wiped their mouths with the backs of their hands. The boy pinched his slice between two fingers and squeezed it into the wind. Drops scattered, vanished. "What for?" Elian asked. "For what left with us," the boy said, "and what stayed behind." The helmsman adjusted the wheel by a hair. The ship obliged with a contented sigh. Mireia's journal lay open on the hatch cover. Not blank now. Lines had appeared. No names, no coordinates, only a set of narrow tracks, parallel and close, as if two quills had traced the same journey from different hands and then decided halfway through to become one. Elian touched the paper. It was warm. He thought of the other deck, of the face that had been his and wasn't his, of the hand pressed to his chest, and the weight that had threatened to sink him and, instead, had taught him to float. He had not returned unchanged. No one does. But change is not loss. It is the inventory a life takes when the sea asks it to tell the truth. Toward evening, a coastline teased the horizon, too distant to claim, close enough to promise. No one hurried. They coiled rope because rope likes to be coiled. They checked the seams because seams like to be checked. They ate because men should eat, and if the fade had taught them anything, it was that hunger doesn't disappear just because a world goes quiet. When night fell, it fell completely, the way nights do when they have never doubted their own purpose. Stars pricked the sky in careful patterns, neither more nor fewer than needed. Elian lay in his hammock, eyes open. He waited for the hum. It did not come. Instead, he heard ordinary ship noises, the yawn of a board, the polite drip of water, the private language of canvas speaking to wind. He listened to these and felt a loyalty to them he had not known before. Sleep took him without bargaining. He woke before the bell, not to a voice, not to a vision, but to a smell. Pine, the kind that rides a morning off the land, thin at first, then certain. It braided itself through the salt and placed the word shore in his mouth. He went up quietly. Mireia was already there, one hand on the rail, the other resting on the journal. The boy sat cross-legged near the bow, eyes closed, face turned toward whatever light the world was willing to offer. The coast had sharpened into a truth. Low hills, a suggestion of dunes, a thin line of trees like stitches across the sand. Marelu? Elian asked. Mireia shook her head once. Not the one we left, she said, but a harbor all the same. Elian considered this. Will they know us? They never do, she said gently. That's the kindness of harbors. They anchored in a quiet, not the holy hush of the fade. This was the practical quiet of men doing work well, the clink of chain, the complaint of a windlass, the conversational groan of timbers accepting a rest they felt they had earned. A small boat came out from the shore with two figures. Neither hurried. They circled once, reading the ship the way one reads a face. What name? The older one called. Voice as simple as bread. Mireia looked at Elian. Elian looked at the boy. The boy took up the parchment, untied it, and opened it flat on his knees. Where drawings had appeared and vanished before, there was only one line now, clean and forward, ending in a small mark that looked like a star. Mireia turned back to the boat. The Lamento del Sur, she said. The older man nodded as if this answered any reasonable question. You have a right to the key, he said. There's room where the blue nets hang. Room? A small and perfect word. They went ashore in pairs, not because they needed to, but because going together felt like good seamanship. The land kept its pine promise. Sand gave way to boards, boards to a narrow street that wandered as if it, too, had recently woken from a long dream. Shops were unambitious but sincere. Tins, ropes, green glass, bread. At the end of the street stood a tavern with a sign, not broken but gently faded by years of weather. The door, when pushed, did not argue. Inside, warmth. Not the heat of a hearth made to impress. The warmth that builds in a room that has taken care of people for a long time and has decided to continue. They sat. They ordered easy things. They ate with the deliberate attention of men who know that food is not a story and should be allowed to be food. No one asked where they had come from. This too was a kindness. On the way back the boy fell in step with Elian. Do you think it will find us again? The boy asked. The fade? The boy nodded. Elian watched the light sliding along the water, the ordinary obedient way it does when it has no reason to perform. It finds everyone, he said, not to take, to ask. What will it ask next time? Elian smiled at nothing in particular. What we've learned since this time. The boy seemed satisfied with this, which was fortunate, because there was no better answer. Dusk bent the harbor into softness. Lines knocked gently against masts, a patient percussion. Someone on a nearby boat told a joke so quietly that only the laughter reached them. Elian paused at the gangway and placed a hand on the hull. Thank you, he said softly. It was not clear to whom. The ship, the sea, the part of himself that had crossed and returned without crossing. The wood under his palm was warm from the day. It did not speak. It did not need to. Some gratitude is meant to be left where it is given. That night, the ship slept hard. Even the gulls did not bother them. Elian lay in his hammock and let the dark come all the way in. He thought of the first breath in the tavern at Marelu, the one that began this telling, of the bridge hidden in mist, of the echo who had placed a hand on his chest and asked him to remember what he had survived. He heard no hum. He heard his own breathing and the ships, and somewhere far off, the tidy gossip of small waves exchanging news with the shore. He closed his eyes. If you are listening now, Wherever you are safe. The day is over. Nothing more is expected of you. Let the sea remember what you cannot carry. Let the night keep what you do not need to hold. And when morning comes, it will come the way mornings prefer to come. On time, without hurry, with enough light for whatever work is yours, and no more. Rest. The water is quiet. The ship is steady. The wind knows your name. Sleep.